a lot for the invitation. Yeah, I'm happy to be here again. This is where everything started. NavVis is actually a spin-off of Technical University. And the room where the four founders of NavVis, of which I'm one of them, did start the whole thing, is just 50 meters away from here at the chair of media technology. So it's great to be back. I would like to talk about two things. The first thing is provide a little bit of a background of what we are doing at NavVis, what kind of company we are, and how we did kind of evolve into where we are today. And then in the second part, I will put a special emphasis on why did we decide to build the company here in Munich, and why did we decide to kind of extend and expand into the other European countries first before now moving to Asia and the US. So let me start perhaps with a very brief personal introduction. As I said, we are four founders. I'm the only one who doesn't bring a PhD from Technical University. So my three co-founders did build a big part of what is the underlying and fundamental technology behind NavVis here at Technical University. I myself have a background in computer science and economics, but did study in Passau and Karlsruhe. Then spent quite some years with McKinsey, so I quite enjoyed seeing some of my former colleagues' charts being quoted here. First in Europe, worked in many different European countries, in Germany, in France, in Italy, Austria, Switzerland, and UK. Then moved to Switzerland to get my PhD there, and then transferred to the US for some years, first living in New York and then in Silicon Valley. And when I came back here, my very best friend Georg had already pushed the boundaries of a very interesting technology to a point where I thought, wow, that's even more interesting than helping big companies in their own growth and sometimes in their own cost cutting, is trying to do the very same with my own company. And that's where NavVis came into being, and that's pretty much exactly 4 years ago now. So when I try to explain what we're doing at NavVis, I always try with an analogy. So pretty much every single industry and every single process that operates under the open air is today tied to the fundamental digital grid that high-definition maps and GPS provide. So if you think about parcel delivery, Amazon can now deliver a parcel in Munich 1 hour after you ordered it. That's amazing. It's of course not possible because the delivery cars drive so much faster now than they did 10 or 15 years ago, but because the whole process has been digitized end to end. If you think about agriculture, every modern agricultural machine is tied to GPS and maps. And Uber, for example, now a $70 billion company, even if in some trouble right now, is at the end little more than a transaction engine sitting on everyone's customers and drivers' smartphones that run GPS and maps. However, if we look into the indoor world, we don't have both parts of the equation. We don't have good maps, and we don't have a reliable positioning signal. And that was the founding idea of NavVis. Let's try to bring something like GPS into buildings. However, let's do not something that requires to install a little satellite in every single room, because that scales badly. But let's try to rebuild, how we human beings and pretty much all other living beings navigate and find their way around, and that is by using our sense of vision. And when Georg, our CTO, started thinking about developing something like that, it was back in 2007. That was still kind of a pretty ambitious moonshot. Now everyone is talking about AI and computer vision, and it's built in these new autonomous cars, but in 2007 no one actually believed it could be done. However, it can be done, and over the last years we developed 3 stacks of technology that are pretty closely working together to provide exactly for the indoors what we already have for the outdoors. So the first thing, we call it our trolley, is a little shrink Google car. So you push it through a building and it creates a photorealistic 3D model of the interior of a building. And the second thing is then something like Google Maps or Google Street View for a building. To today, it's surprising. A lot of our customers, even from industry, where you think everything would already be digital, are still working with kind of very primitive 2D maps. And only the fact that they can now access all of the building data in a browser was already a huge step for them. And then the last thing, originally we thought it would be the first thing we would be doing, but it came out to be the last thing, is an indoor navigation app running on a smartphone that doesn't need any additional infrastructure, no beacons, no Wi-Fi. It uses the camera and figures out where in a building it is, pretty much like we human beings do, by comparing the picture to what our trolley has previously recorded. So let's actually jump into these three things. The trolley is, as I said, a shrink Google Street View car. It uses laser scanning and cameras. You can set it up in a few minutes. And one person with a trolley like that can scan up to 50,000 square meters on a single day. So 50,000 square meters, you know, if you think about your 50 square meter apartment, that's 1,000 of them, so that's quite a lot. And you don't need to know anything about surveying. So you just press record, you start pushing that thing through a room, and everything else is done automatically. It doesn't drive by itself, which we seriously considered, but there are still these doors and light switches and locks that prohibit that. So then the second thing is that you don't need any expertise in bringing that data to the web anymore. So all the post-processing is automated. Here you see an example from Deutsches Museum. So you don't need to physically go there anymore. You can virtually visit it. Looks a little bit like Google Street View, but it's much more powerful because it has the whole 3D structure of the building behind it. It can calculate routes. You can attach information to the asset there. It's a very powerful tool, and we were ourselves very surprised what kind of use cases our customers would find for this kind of technology. So then the very last part is the navigation. Here you see how the app works. By the way, there is a version that we provide still for free for Technical University. So if you have some work or lectures here at the campus, you can download the app and look for people, rooms. It's going to guide you through the whole campus here of Technical University. So what are our customers doing with that? We actually were very naive when we started the company. And we're, of course, thinking about our own lives. And there you've got problems like I arrive at the main station, train station in Munich, and I've got 5 minutes to find the right underground track that goes out to Garching, which can be pretty challenging if you're in Munich for the first time. Or I'm at Deutsches Museum, and you know, where's the bathroom or the cafeteria? That was kind of reasonably thought. However, where the real needs were, that was actually in buildings where most capital is deployed. So our first big customers were actually coming from industry, the big automotive companies. And now we're pretty much serving all big automotive companies, Daimler, BMW, Volkswagen, Toyota, General Motors. And they are doing stuff we would had never expected would be any useful. They are scanning factories. Because surprisingly, they know very little about the real whereabouts in their factory. It's very useful for them to compare different factories and see the real thing compared to what they planned many years ago. We as well now moving heavily into construction. We're working with some of the largest construction companies in the world, European and American companies, and supervising big construction sites. Think about Berlin Airport or Stuttgart 21 or Elbphilharmonie, where it would be very, very useful to know exactly what's going on there, and perhaps even more interesting, who messed up. So insurance is another big field. We're working with Allianz in Munich Re, for example, here in Munich to help them evaluate and later pay out insurance fees. So there are a couple of more use cases in logistics, in facility management, but I don't want to bore you with all of them. Here you see an example from a big factory site that actually spits out around 1,000 cars every single day. And so far, scanning a site like that and processing all the data was something that would take 6 to 9 months, which rendered the whole exercise pretty much useless because in 6 to 9 months, the whole factory is going to change all over. So after you are kind of through scanning it one time, the data that you did scan first is already useless because so much change has actually happened in that factory. We can actually now, with our technology, with just one of these machines, scan that in a single day. And our lead customers are by now scanning every single of their factories on a global level on a regular schedule so that they can make sure that the management team here in Europe can compare the newest installations in the factory in China, in Eastern Europe, and in America, just with a click in the browser. Here you see kind of a little bit of the trajectory in terms of customers, and it was, as I said, for ourselves quite a surprise who would be the lead customers. So it all started in the automotive industry because the relation between what it costs you to scan a factory and the amount of capital that's deployed there and what even a small improvement efficiency can deliver was so positive. Now we're actually tickling down the industry. It continued with the big tier 1 suppliers like the Bosch and Contis, and now they are even thinking about including the big OEMs and the tier 1 suppliers, including all their suppliers into this kind of network of scans. Perhaps you heard that BMW was just suffering a bad loss of a few $100 million by a supplier who couldn't deliver in time. So the kind of oversight and insight this gives you across your whole supply chain is quite amazing. Perhaps a few words about the team. It's a very international team, so we have kind of a team that comes from more than 40 different countries. Yes, Europe, but all over Asia, and from a huge variety of different companies. So a lot of consultants, McKinsey people, BCG people, Bain people, but as well from Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Salesforce. And as I said, very international with a big Asian team by now. That's, of course, more driven through sales, but as well on the engineering side. I'll actually skip that and move to the second part of my presentation, which is more about what was our journey from being founded here in Munich, and why did we found here in Munich and not in Silicon Valley, which might have been the natural place for a company like this. So kind of the first thing is the research here. And that were many, many years of research. So we calculated that around 50 years of research, I think 15 PhD theses, around 40 master theses, 30 to 40 peer-reviewed publications, all that had happened here at Technical University before we even started the company. And of course, we really wanted to continue that. So back in 2013, when we really considered what would be the best place on earth to found this company, it was pretty much two places we considered. One was exactly here, and the other was, let's go back to Silicon Valley. We all four founders had lived some time there. And of course, the ecosystem for getting funding was kind of still looking very attractive. But when we weighted these factors, kind of more funding in the beginning or kind of keeping the close ties to the research team where we did spin all that out from and access to the right kind of talent, we decided to actually stay here. And there were a couple of other things going on. So there was still an active research project where we could participate as a company. That was very attractive. And then, now looking back, we even missed out on the most important things. That's kind of our customers. Now, our largest customer that really helped us to develop the use cases that made most sense in the beginning for this kind of technology are all around here. It's kind of Siemens and BMW and Audi and Daimler and KUKA and Festo, kind of all companies around here. And we would have hardly had any of these companies in Silicon Valley. Now perhaps Tesla, but what is Tesla compared to kind of the whole group of German automotive companies? So that was, to some extent, well thought through in terms of access to talent and research funding. And it was a little bit lucky when I think with respect to our real customer base today. There's one more thing, that's the suppliers and the whole network of companies that can do stuff like this. And that, I think, was another unexpected thing. We were very naive when it came to building a piece of hardware. We all have a background in software, in signal processing and machine learning, but no one of us had ever built some hardware. And if you want to build a piece of hardware like that, you need very good suppliers. And the network of suppliers that can build high-precision measurement instruments is very unique in the area between Stuttgart, Munich, and Nuremberg. And we are pretty much sourcing, despite a few electronical components that we right out of Taiwan and China. Everything that is tailored for us is tailored by specialists right here in the region. So, looking back, I'm very happy that we didn't make the move to Silicon Valley, even it was very tempting in terms of funding, and funding was indeed harder here, and that's definitely something where I as well look to the European Union and German government to provide a better environment for making fundraising easier for startups. There's actually a great program now by the European Investment Bank that I hope we can tap into. But beside that, we found a wonderful environment here. So it actually continued. We did finally find a very good German and European investors. And while I still get that the level of valuation, while kind of very good in a European context, was only, let's say, nice in a global context, it still brings a couple of nice advantages with it. First, salary levels, of course, here in Munich are still, I think, only half of what they would be for us in Silicon Valley, so it's only fair that valuation levels are a little bit lower. However, I really enjoy that we can see our investors on a monthly basis here in Munich. So even after we did our first big Series A, we got a lot of inbound requests from kind of American and Silicon Valley investors. We still decided to add another European investor to the crowd so that we could continue to work on that very personal level and meet in the board with our investors on a monthly basis in our meeting room here in Munich. So the next step of leverage that we used when it comes to Germany and Europe, there are a lot of accelerator programs. We work very closely with the TUM Entrepreneurship Center and Unternehmertum, and we work closely with ESA and their accelerator program, which was not only useful in terms of helping us to understand how to found a company. I think there we were kind of much more advanced than perhaps the usual more scientifically stuffed startup, but it was extremely helpful in terms of setting up the right connections, finding new entry doors into our target customers. And of course, money-wise, it was very welcome as well. And then the go-to-market. As I said, our primary target customers are all around here. So the first big contracts we brought in were exactly here, with Daimler in Stuttgart, with BMW, with Siemens. And that was, of course, very helpful as well in terms of traveling. And when I quit my job with McKinsey, I thought one of the most enjoyable things would be spending more time and more nights in my apartment here in Munich. And I was actually traveling much more than I thought. Kind of in the beginning, as an entrepreneur, you are very much a traveling salesman, specifically if you're doing a B2B thing. But that the fact that I could limit the travel in the beginning of to the region of southern Germany saved us so much time and made us so much faster. So that was definitely a key point. And then when we started to extend our reach, we first added Austria and Switzerland, and then our next wave was really adding more European countries with very different success rates, which I think has to do both with the team as well as with the economic foundations in these countries. So we were quite successful in some of the fast emerging Eastern European countries, in Northern Europe, in UK. It was much more difficult in Spain or Portugal, for example. We as well don't have a good customer base in France, for example, but I think it's more the reason that we don't have good French-speaking salespeople yet. And then our kind of third wave of expansion really went international. So last year we did found an office in New York, and this year either this year or next year, we will open an office in China. So just looking a little bit at the map, right now we've got two offices. One is here in Munich with around 130 people, and then we have our office in New York with around 7 people right now. But that's mainly sales and marketing. Yeah, you see Europe. Very interesting how this all evolved. We have by far the strongest footprint, I think, in the regions that are dark blue. Or that were dark blue on your map. So southern Germany is extremely strong. Everywhere where you've got big factories. We did sell a couple of machines and have resellers in Italy, but it's all northern Italy where they still have a lot of industry, automotive industry, automotive suppliers as well. Eastern Europe is specifically strong where there's automotive industry. So while it might look a little bit surprising that we're so much stronger in Eastern Europe than we are in Western Europe, that is mainly driven by our automotive clients bringing us to their big factories in Eastern Europe and to their suppliers there. We haven't actually really made it into Peugeot and Renault, which is a pity, but I really believe you need to be present there. So as a German company, it's still surprisingly difficult to make it into the French economy. At least it was for us. Perhaps we've just not done as good job as we did in other markets. When it comes to really going international, China was a big surprise. So last year, I think China was by far our fastest growing market. And we did it all out of Munich. So we hired a few people with a Chinese background right out of Technical University, and they did sell like crazy in China. It was almost a bit scary. And I'm still not entirely sure if we really understand what's going on there. So at some point in time, we definitely need an office there to understand that better. And then the American market is again a very special market. It is very receptive. It's still the largest market in the world, but you need to be there. So doing cold calls with a thick German accent from Munich to kind of a surveying company or an automotive supplier in the Midwest just doesn't work. So we did really hire an American team from the scratch, people that worked there both in management consulting and in startup environments, and bring a background from Ivy League universities. And that now seems to work. So now we've actually some nice first customers and see a good pipeline in the US. So that was kind of my brief overview on the history of NavVis and how we try to do our best to tap into the different German and European institutions. And thank you for your attention. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.